Hello, and we are live. Welcome to Developer Insights. I'm David.
Hello, David. I'm Justin.
Oh, you're just holding me on the line. Together, we are the leads on game development and design here at Codename.
We also founded Codename, so we've got that going for us too.
And we're going to be your hosts for this episode and, of course, for every episode.
Because when we're not here, the show doesn't happen.
It's held up for 45 episodes in a row.
46 now.
We might
Speaking
split
of
out
which,
halfway, right? And get a new host just to blow it out of the water.
it could be fun. Anyway, today is our 46th episode.
And we'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, Bugs. Bugs. They're buggerific. Wait, did you just...
What? We had Bugs sponsor the episode?
After reading, doesn't that word mean something different? Anyway, yes, I figured if we're going to spend so much time talking about bugs, we should at least be getting paid for it.
Is there some sort of bug-run industry organization that's footing the bill for this sponsorship?
Listen, I don't know. I didn't think the joke through that far or write it. Anyway, is it too late to switch the sponsor to ExpressVPN?
Anyway. That was a train wreck. We are here to answer your development and design questions about Idle Champions.
And if you don't ask any questions, however, you may have to suffer through Justin's one-man reenactment of the final episode of Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Oh yeah, man, I watched it last night. It was a real nail-biter. I mean, whatever was going to happen to all these characters that appear prominently in the original trilogy. Ooh, such peril.
Whoa. No spoilers. They're going to be people who haven't seen it.
They all survive.
Oh. Gasp. It's a long weekend coming up. We're good.
Yeah.
Anyway.
This is our Friday. We get to just mess around, right?
I feel like that's the case. Anyway, as always, we have pulled some questions forward from the previous show that we didn't get to last week, and we will answer those while we are waiting for new questions to come in, as well as we have a few updates on items that were flagged to get looked up by the dev team. And so without further... It says stalling for time. I'm going to change that. Let's get started with those. So... on the fixes list here, actually, there's the first item here. I was going to actually apologize to the Epic players. Last Friday, Peter, who usually does the build pushes, was out, and there was a bug that needed to get fixed ASAP because it was blocking. Some players were unable to load the game, and so I muddled my way through that and got a build out for Epic. Unfortunately, I did miss a step, which is not overwriting the settings file. So for those of you who had your resolution reset back up to 1080p, that one is on me. My apologies. The next fix, we did get a fix in for some of the UI disappearing after a large number of items are on the screen. I ran into a case where this was happening after going to various Modron cores, and I know Mark found and tracked down what the cause of that was, so we got that fixed. There was another issue last week that also got a push out, which was for saves that were waiting when you completed and killed a boss, so waiting for boss loot. So that has also been pushed out and fixed. It was brought to our attention on the stream last week that there had been some reports of the game definitions loading over and over again every time you loaded, and I had adamantly said that I had checked that, and I had checked it. Unfortunately, what I missed was that when you get a play server for definitions when the game loads, it randomly gives you a different server to kind of load balance that, and that was actually causing them to have, I guess because we'd put a timestamp in there accidentally, each of the servers had a slightly different checksum on their definitions, which meant that was actually completely bypassing our check for that if you were in fact downloading the definitions repeatedly. So that should be half fixed at this moment, and the remainder of the fix for that will go in very shortly. So you should be not getting one every day, or I guess it's once a day right now. It's not every time you load the game. We did round that timestamp down to the nearest day, but it did need a patch, like an actual build patch to go out to completely fix that. So that is to my understanding, that build is out, and just some back-end changes will turn that on, and you should no longer be getting the definitions downloaded repeatedly. Yeah, and I think there's one here, maybe Justin, you would speak to this, because I am not familiar with this one.
Yes. So the other thing we wanted to talk about was just quickly some updates and fixes that are happening to Nahara. There were a couple of issues with Nahara, one being that her levity stacks were not incrementing correctly because she was having a hard time actually getting legitimate kills while you were just smashing your way through the earlier areas, especially if you had click familiars out. So she's going to be updated it's going to take a build, unfortunately, to fix this bug, but she will be updated so that she more consistently gets those levity stacks. So it will decrease the number of quest items you need to collect in the next area correctly. And then there's an issue with her slot 5 gear where it didn't actually do anything because the effect was not set up correctly. So the new effect will be that it increases, well, the old effect was supposed to be, but the new effect will be that it increases the effect of her ultimate. So her ultimate increases her own damage. It doesn't do damage itself. So the effect of her ultimate will be increased with that piece of gear. And then there's a couple of other just random sort of buffs we're doing. We're trying to make her abilities that increase her damage based on the other Black Dice Society champions in the formation. Those will be a little bit more powerful. And some of that stuff is going out, I think, like right now. All of the data side stuff is going out pretty quickly. And then the code side stuff will go out a little bit more slowly. It'll probably get out to Steam and Epic today. And possibly some of the consoles, but it certainly will not be out to Switch for a little bit. Probably a couple of weeks away on Switch, unfortunately.
Right. All right. And we've got a few ongoing issues. I am still pestering Justin about the missing node on the strong core. If I remember, this week you had a new excuse, something about...
Yeah, we talked about it earlier in the week. The reason it's not like an easy thing is because the location in the core where there's supposed to be a node is currently an open spot, so you can put pipes there. And we have to find a way to basically get the game to remove any pipes you have put there in order to put the node in there. And so it might mess up people's layouts and stuff. And so we're kind of trying to figure out exactly how to do that. So it's still on my list. It's right here. It's on my list. You can't see my list, but my list is over here. It's on there.
Okay. We'll have to get someone on the front end just to have a check that says, hey, this isn't actually no longer, if it's no longer a valid spot, pull it out. I think that's probably the easiest way to do it.
Yeah, the only problem, if somebody has all of their flow going through that spot, all of a sudden all their nodes,
I feel like that can't be helped.
Stop getting. I might just
You're just
try
never
and find a way
do
to move it somewhere else or something. We'll see.
Okay.
It's still a pretty strong core.
We are still on the list is to have Havilar's imps automatically spawn to save feats with formations, and actually also something was brought to my attention in the Discord last week was that there is a blackout period on random time gate champion selection, but digging into it, I found that actually that is a manually set date range. And those primarily were set to 2021 dates. So those need to either be updated or use our new, I know we've got a new system in place for the new store that actually does know when the events are running. So if we can integrate into that, that would be probably the best solution to that. And I know I've also put that on your list, Justin. So
right there.
When you get to that, that should solve that problem as well. Okay, let's hop into the leftover questions from the previous show. I see there's a real nice softball there waiting for us.
Yeah, this is one that came up at the very end of the last show. We didn't quite get to it, but it's one that we always like to answer for people who are new and are just curious about game design or game development, I guess. And this is a question from Thunder JP, who asked last week, what programming languages do you use for idle champions?
Yeah, so like I said, this is a nice softball question. So client side, the game is built in Unity, and we use C#. C# is the language that we use to write the code for that. And they're both platforms that I can't not help but recommend. They're great beginner platforms. Anyone wants to get into that. And then on the back end server code is written in PHP. I know it's a fan favorite. The PHP doesn't get cut enough slack on the web, but we've been doing PHP code for our back end games for ever.
15 years.
Yeah, something like that.
No, not quite that long, but yeah, a while.
it definitely does the trick, and it also gives us an advantage on the back end that we actually, because it's not compiled, we can make updates on the fly and put in fixes that, and it just goes in seamlessly, and players, you wouldn't even know that it had happened other than that the thing would be fixed. So so that's what we use for as far as programming languages go for Idle Champions. Yeah, I mean, maybe an addendum to that is all of our servers are a Linux-based system, CentOS originally, and we use MySQL as a database. So let's hop into the next question.
Let's do it.
This question is from Bill Slowski, 002. When might we see new patrons for more weekly challenges?
So we are planning out the next patron. We've talked about some ideas we've had here on stream a couple of times, but the one thing we want to make sure we do before we roll out a brand new patron is just find a way to reduce the scope of the patron chores that you have every week. Certainly with 4 patrons right now and 10 challenges per patron per week, that's 40 kind of challenges you have to do with potentially different formations on different patrons. It can take quite a while. A little bit more time than we kind of want players to need to spend maxing out their patron challenges. So we've got a couple of ideas of things to do to make those challenges a little bit less work every week, every Monday when people do their patron chores. And so we're going to try and get that done prior to the release of a new patron. So once you see changes to patron challenges, there'll probably be a new patron sometime after that. Let's see, next question here from last week is from Hayden Hayward, who says, can you add an undo button to Modrons? Sometimes I accidentally remove the wrong piece when repiping my Modron. Repiping my Modron, that's an interesting phrase.
Not something expected to say today.
No.
Yeah, that's actually not a bad suggestion. I don't think it would be super complicated to add something like that in. I definitely understand the concern when you accidentally modify something that's rather complicated, and it's especially one of those things where it could be like, oh shoot, which piece did I move? What piece was there before? So yeah, I mean, I don't see any reason we couldn't put something like that in, and I think it's probably a nice quality of life feature to have on the list. So we'll put that in and see what we can do for a priority on that one. And by that I mean, I'm not sure entirely how high up the priority list it can go, but I'm going to put it on the list nevertheless. All right.
I've got a lot of things that are probably going to be higher than that on my on my to-do list. Yeah.
Next question here, and the last one left over from last week, is from Runegetum. Sure. The question they asked was, I love that you put items in the shop from time to time that support charities. However, they all seem to be local North American charities. Given the international nature of this game, can we have some international charities, please?
Yeah, this is a good question. I think it's one that I've certainly seen before. And we do try to have a large variety in our charities. We try to keep the scope pretty wide. I know recently we did do a charity around Ukraine and support for civilians in Ukraine. We've also in the past done the Canadian Cancer Society, which while it's a Canadian cancer society, anything that kind of supports research into cancer is generally I think going to be pretty international. If we find, I assume if Canada finds a cure for cancer, that we'll probably share it with other people. But I mean, the sort of the simpler answer is, we are a Canadian company. And so we do kind of prefer to support our own sort of community around us, and that's why we tend to focus on things that are more North American focused. With that said, if there's a charity that you think is worthy of us to sort of look at and consider, we do these charity things. I think we try and do at least one a quarter.
Yep.
So just let us know. Send in a ticket and be like, hey, what about these guys? And we'll take a look, because we're more than happy to support any worthy organization wherever they are.
For sure. Okay. that therein ends the leftover questions.
All right, let us scroll down. And I've highlighted a question for you as the very first one. And this was the first question to come in today from Emote with 2 M's. And they asked, the save when exiting the game is continuing to often be ignored, even if we wait for it to retry before it closes the game. It's happening to many of us and is causing rollbacks. Any ideas what might be causing it?
Yeah, so that's a bit of a. I mean, this is a bit of a tricky one. It's one that has been a thorn in our side for a fairly long time at this point. I know I've looked into it on a couple of occasions, and had made alterations that I thought had helped, and or rather had seemed like they were helping with it. But what it appears to be, sort of my best guess, the last time we were digging into this, was that the thread that is calling, that's making the network call, is dependent on where the event is spawned from. And when you close the game, the actual close game event happens from a mouse click event that's coming through, and that event doesn't seem to, like, for whatever reason, that thread is not it's not processing on the network side. And so when that happens, you have to wait the full 15 seconds for the timeout, and then the main game thread catches it. Now, I thought I had put something in there to just actually wait a frame and run it on the main thread. So, and I actually think at the time that I thought that had been catching those cases where it had been happening. So, I mean, it looks like it sounds like it needs a little further digging at this point. It's odd for the rollback, because it should, at least at that point, whatever your previous save should have been, which would have been hopefully within 30 seconds of then. But yeah, I mean, I can put that on the list to dig into further. But my best guess was that it was related to which thread was making the initial network call. But I hadn't seen a case where if you waited for the retry, that it didn't go through. That's a case that I'm not really familiar with. I don't know, Justin, if you'd seen that particular case.
No, I mean, for me, it always seems to work on the second, on the retry, when I do get it not working on the initial close.
Right.
But yeah, it's definitely, I've definitely seen the issue. It is very frustrating.
Well, yeah, it's certainly annoying. You click close and it's like, no, I'm not closing, not till I save.
Like, please close the game.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree.
Most of the time when I'm doing it, it's because I want to start the game up again, because I'm like testing something that needs a full reset. So certainly, yeah.
Okay. Next question. This one here is from Foolish Genius 89, and they're asking, is it reasonable to include an open 50 more button, quote unquote, I guess relative to bounty contracts? So
yeah.
use 50 more, I think is the intention there.
Yes. Use 50 more bounty contracts, or blacksmithing. Well, I guess we have it for blacksmithing. Yeah, this is something we've seen requested a couple of times. Well, more than a couple of times, most likely, over 46 episodes. And it's something we've kind of hummed and hawed about. But I think it is something that we should probably just add to the game at some point in the near future, because it seems like something that players would like. And so, I don't see a big negative to it. Unless you see a big negative to it, Dave.
No, I don't think so.
All right, I'll highlight it.
It's slowly eroding us on these ones.
So if you just ask every week,
I know a year from now it'll be open 150 more.
Be like, yeah, okay.
Cool. Next question here is also from Emote. This question is, why do abilities that take time to become active, like Shandy's dash timer, pause during zone transitions, but abilities that are active for a time, like Torgar's Blood Rage, continue to time down during zone transitions? This seems like a very unfair bias.
Yeah, it definitely seems like there are some inconsistencies there. There's a note here. A couple of the folks in the office here were talking about this earlier today, and it is definitely inconsistent about what ticks down when you're changing areas and what doesn't. I think in general, my preference would be to have nothing tick down during zone transitions. So I think that we should look at things like Torgar's Blood Rage, and there's another note here about potions ticking down. And just try and get everything to not tick down. That would be certainly my preference.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, I think there's maybe a few caveats around that, right? For example, like, buffs that last multi-instance or multi-resets, right? Like stuff that's running for, like a 3-day or a week-long
sure, yeah,
buff.
weekend promo stuff that has a fixed end or whatnot. Yeah,
Or I'm thinking of even of things like the, potions or buffs you might get buffs you might get activated when you make a purchase. I
yeah.
think those are counting down. No, they're not actually not
But
counting down to a
those are
fixed
all,
time. Yeah.
well, they're kind of counting down to a fixed time because they last for 3 days or whatever from the point at which you purchase them. So I would definitely count those as things that are counting down to a fixed time, as opposed to things that are like, say, you pop a potion and it runs
Right.
for 15 minutes, and that could certainly pause during transitions.
Okay, next question here from Lord Javix. Why is it that we can't redo variants? I understand the initial reward not repeating, but locking us out completely makes little sense to me. The first thing I have to ask myself is, should I even do this cool new variant now, or will I brick my game later? Or, sorry, new player, I can't help you because the game changed since I did that patron variant, and I can't remember it from a year ago.
Yeah. So there's a couple of reasons why, and some are not necessarily valid anymore. But the one that kind of remains valid is that by making it so you can only do variants once, it allows us, I think it allows us at least, to just be a little bit more crazy in the variants and do things that we don't necessarily want players to be able to, do over and over again. So, for example, if we did a variant where, say, enemies spawned super duper fast, if we let you guys repeat that variant over and over, then that would just be the place that you go to farm, and it makes it so that we couldn't do things like that, or we'd have to find some way to like turn that power off so that there wasn't just one place to go that's like the best variant to go to farm X. So that's kind of the biggest reason I think that remains, that we don't want folks to be endlessly redoing variants. Certainly, you can redo them. Sort of the patron system was designed to account for some of this, where with each patron you have an opportunity to redo the variant, albeit with a different formation potentially. So that's kind of where we're at right now on redoing variants. It's a tough thing for balancing, making interesting variants, and certainly sometimes we make very fun variants that you would like to do again, but we also don't want to make broken variants or allow for variants to be used to do things that are broken in the game. So.
Okay.
Let's see. Next question here is from Oracolo Janice, who asks, who says, I'm a player on Epic. When will I see Store 3 and be able to get the nerd? I assume they mean nerds, not nerfs.
Yes.
The nerds are in Store 3. They asked when they're able to get the nerfs. It's like, we'll give you nerfs anytime you want, but I think you're asking about nerds.
Yeah, I know I'm going to touch that one so quickly. But that said, that is a good question in regards to Store 3. It is something we're still testing with a small subset of players and still working on iterating over, making sure everything is just as good in 3 as it is in 2. I think there's still I know actually even today Jacob was working on a new set of updates for that, just to kind of make things a little more polished in Shop 3. I think probably in about 2 weeks we're going to do another reevaluation of the data on that and see where things are at. But they're getting very close, very comparable to each other right now. So I think soon, but again, I don't have an actual like soon TM is all I've got, which unfortunately doesn't give you an exact date because we don't have an exact date. But it is something that has been continued to be iterated on, continue to be polished up, and it will be soon. Next question here from Alpha Kroll. Any update on the costs and rewards for trials? Oh, and half the question just got deleted. All right, we'll go with that.
I didn't read that other half of the question, so I only wanted to answer this part. So, yeah, we've had a couple of questions actually I've seen through here. People just asking for an update on what's going on with the trials updates that we've been talking about for a while. And I can confirm that we do have a developer who has been working on them. So they are in progress now. Which is more than I could say a month ago. So that is a good thing. And hopefully we'll be able to get some of those trials changes in front of you all in the next couple of months. Hopefully before the end of the year, but don't quote me on that.
Okay. Next question here is from Vovkas. The question, or it says, I saw a good suggestion on Discord a few weeks ago. What do you think about it? The idea was to apply legendaries not on heroes, but on Modron pipes. Because we have to use upgraded legendary heroes again and again, others feel useless, but with legendary pipes instead of players, players could experiment with different heroes and formations.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. I think that anything in the game that kind of has a rarity from like common, uncommon, rare, and epic is certainly ripe for having a legendary level to it. I don't think we've considered doing that to Modron pipes at this point yet, because I think there's still we recently did the Modron overcharge system. Back in May, it was, I think.
Supercharge.
So the supercharge, whatever it was called. We did that system. So that's sort of the most recent update for Modron. So I don't think we're going to do legendary pipes anytime soon, but I wouldn't be surprised if they appear in the game at some point in the next several years. But yeah, for now, just legendaries on champions.
Okay.
Let's see. Next question here is from Norvi, who says, console player here, can you add the ability to remove assigned familiars directly rather than having to relocate them in the list above? The more familiars I have, the harder it is to do.
Yeah, so I guess this is a question more of like, I assume probably on champions. I know on the console UI, kind of the tricky bit for the familiars was sort of aligning all the spots with the familiars, because obviously in the PC one you just drag them to the actual slot, whereas in the console one I think you have to go in and select what the slot is and then select the familiar that goes there, and sort of it's a more drawn out process. It's a less direct process. So it does seem like this is the ability to remove assigned familiars. So assumedly this is probably from the champions. It could certainly that could certainly be made easier. Maybe a button on the champion itself when you're selected on them. But it does make it a little trickier to do things like pulling them off of other locations, like pulling them off of ultimates or pulling them off of the ones that are directly on the playing field without sort of carefully thinking through how the interface for that would work. Yeah, I don't know. That feels like it would need a little bit more thought. Let's do that in a sort of a way that's intuitive. What do you think, Justin?
Yeah, I think the familiar UI in the console UI has always been a little bit clunky.
Agreed.
I do think it could certainly, it's certainly a candidate, one of my top candidates in the console UI for a reevaluation, because it's just a bit of a pain in the butt to use.
Yeah. So I acknowledge there's a potentially an issue there for usability, but I don't have a good answer immediately, and it does feel like it's something that would have to dedicate some time to work through that in a proper way. So probably not something we can tackle right now.
All right, the next question is from the Real Bunny Beast, and this is quite a technical question. And they ask, have you looked into leveraging automated CI/CD pipelines like Azure DevOps rather than relying on Peter handcrafting the releases? Are there any limitations when it comes to multi-platform Unity projects?
Yeah,
I'm interested in knowing the answer to this.
Yes. When you're asking about automated CI/CD, it's talking about continuous integration or continuous distribution pipelines. This is something where if you commit code commits get pushed, and then some kind of a platform or tool is making builds and adding the changes into that, and then something is being pushed along to the next stage, which would be someone QAing that, and then that gets pushed out. Rather than relying on Peter to handcraft the releases. Now, it's certainly there's some improvements that we'd like to do to the release process. For a lot of the builds, it's actually not there's not a lot to them at this point. We have some build scripts. We pull the most recent code in, and Peter pushes go on the build script, and it puts out the output, and then he pushes go on the upload, and then there's some logging into the various platforms to set the builds live. For example, like on Steam and on Epic. I think actually all the other platforms as well. You have to go in and actually say, all right, now that you've got this version of the game, please make this game the live version. The Epic one, as it turned out, that Peter had actually a bunch of that scripted, but had been doing that build on his development machine rather than on our build machine due to some issues he'd run into on the build machine. So unbeknownst to me, when he was away, I did it on the build machine, which is unfortunately why it ended up with such a large build as well, because usually the way builds works is that they diff against the previous build, and then you just have to download the difference, which is why on Steam often the updates are 2 or 3 megs, which is great, rather than a full 1.4 gigs or whatever the game is up to at this point. But as far as sort of like the Azure DevOps, I'm not super familiar with what tools they offer. We actually here in-house have a continuous integration using Jenkins, which is I guess the icon for Jenkins is a little butler guy who pulls our dev builds and gets those into our local channels so that people who are QAing things can have the most up-to-date build. So we have various portions of that that we use to make things a little simpler. We'd love to have more time spent on getting those more automated for the builds, which obviously isn't something that we've had time to do. But I guess for now it is what it is. I know Peter would love to get time on that, but I don't think that he feels that he does have time to look into that more deeply. But it's definitely something we'd like to have, sort of a more automated process there, particularly because, when we do full set of builds, it's Steam and Epic and Apple and Google and Xbox and PlayStation and Nintendo, and they all have various different caveats that you have to remember. So anyway,
cool.
Hopefully that covered that satisfactorily.
Okay, it looks like Martin is writing into our document that there is a giveaway about to begin. So longtime viewers will know that this is your opportunity to win 42 chests of your choice.
Ooh, silver.
All you have to do is enter the keyword into chat once the giveaway begins, and you will automatically be entered. Well, I guess you will be entered. Not automatically, you'll just be entered if you do that. The keyword will appear in the message, so I won't say it until the message appears so that people don't spam it before the thing starts. But yeah, you can get 42 chests of your choice. They can be any chests. They could be like Dave suggests you could choose silver chests, I guess, if you don't like getting loot. Or you could choose better chests like just gold chests or Modron component chests.
Aluminum chests?
You can't get aluminum chests. Those don't exist. You could get Electrum chests, I guess, if you wanted a chest that you can already get quite a few of. But yeah, that has now begun. Type sponsored into chat. And oh yes, you can't have Glory of Bahamut chests. That's the only one you can't have. Any other chests. Silver Rosy chests, yes, possible cabbage, you could have those. There's all sorts of chests, and you get to pick them. Let us move on to the next question.
Okay.
From Kramock, who asks, are there any plans to put something in the game where players can see what debuffs are currently applied, I assume, to monsters?
So the quick and dirty answer to this question is there are currently no plans for something like that. Always it's a tricky thing when we have to find a new place for new things to be displayed.
Mm-hmm.
beyond the debuffs that would be like directly on the monsters, which I know has been a long-standing like, hey, that's really hard to read. I guess I just have to trust that it's working. What does that little icon mean? I mean, it'd be nice to have a legend for something like that, or something you could pull up that was giving that listed. But it is something that also likely is updating fairly rapidly.
Yeah, yeah, it's a big challenge because they're just so temporary. Like a debuff appears on a monster, and then that monster gets killed, and really the only time when you're going to see a monster for a significant amount of time with debuffs on them, where something like this could be potentially useful, would be if you had a monster that just wasn't dying, and in that case. I'm not sure knowing what debuffs are on the monster, how that's going to help you kill the monster that you're unable to kill anyway. So it is a tough one. Like Dave said, there's some issues for where we put the UI for that. There's certainly not, we're not having a super amount of space available for us to put stuff like that. But it's definitely a question that we see fairly often. And something we will probably have to figure out down the road, but there's no immediate plans to do that because we're just not quite sure how to do it.
Yeah, it definitely feels like it's a question of, is this debuff working? I was like, can I be? And so,
of course, it's working. There are no bugs in the game.
Okay. Next question. This one is from Fewer Pills. Do you or anyone on the team try to math out champs before the release? It doesn't really seem like it, especially after Nahara and her buff, because she's still worse than Delina and Rosie. Hopefully not combined.
So yes, we do have some spreadsheets that we run all the numbers through prior to release. All we can really do is trust that the spreadsheets are outputting proper numbers. And so it might very well be that there's something in the spreadsheet for Nahara that is not correct. Certainly the balance that I've seen should be resulting in Nahara being fairly competitive, certainly better than Rosie and Delina. I'm not sure if this is a case where players are kind of using Nahara and kind of trying to max her out. So she works best, obviously, with a whole bunch of Black Dice Society champions in the game. If you just try and slot her into an existing formation, yeah, she may very well be a little bit lower than other champions, or lower than you would expect her to be. And obviously, she also has the mechanic that builds up over time. So there's an expectation that she will start out a little bit weaker, but if you use her, she will get more powerful. So we'll continue to evaluate and see where she lies in terms of damage, and see if there's something that's wrong in our model. But yes, we do run all the champions through a spreadsheet, through a sort of balancing model prior to release. We just hope that it works.
Right. And just as you started answering that question, I saw roll through the chat that there are no bugs in Ba Sing Se, so I think maybe that's the company line for there are no bugs. Okay. Yeah. Cool. Next question here. It's from MekiMorosu.
Sure.
I hope so. Are you looking into the weird calculations with Briv and Nahara interactions? Some players get the counts from skips and others do not.
Yeah, so the intention is that players should get the counts from skips. If there is an issue going on here, then we'll need to track down what it is. I know we looked into this, or the team looked into this briefly yesterday when it sort of first got pointed out, and we couldn't initially see why it wouldn't be working. It certainly is the intention that when you skip some areas, you're supposed to get credit for them. So if you guys have any more details on that, on situations where it's not working, please do feel free to open a ticket and let us know.
All right.
It's like Peter was saying that the skip thing seems to be, it's one less area than the areas skipped. So maybe there's just an off by one issue there. Not sure.
Hmm.
But yeah, if you think you know why it's happening, please open a ticket and let us know, and we can look into that for sure. Next question from Irene UK, who says, "Still not on Shop 3 here. Any chance you can make it an opt-in tick box in the options so that we can load the store in the new shop?"
Yeah, it's probably not something that we're going to add at this moment. I mean, we're hoping that we can get the shop out fairly in fairly short order. Obviously, we've been in that particular situation for a little while now. Although, as each and every iteration that we do on the store does get it into a better place, we are actually getting much closer to getting to that. There isn't a huge difference between the shops, especially just in terms of functionality. I know the one item that stands out is that Nerds champion that people are looking to get. But beyond that, I don't think there's any further disparities there. Justin, correct me if I'm wrong.
I think it's just Nerds.
It's just the Nerds, yeah. So otherwise, the shop itself is an uplift or a facelift in terms of the visual appearance of the store, but it is not changing what you have available to you beyond that one particular item. And yes, I know that item is certainly teasing those players who are looking at it being like, I really wish I could grab that. This doesn't seem fair, but we will, in the fullness of time, get that out to everybody. Yeah. Oh yes, there's I guess Mars is typing in the doc here that the bonus is for chest sales. So
sales, yeah, that's for sure.
So that's definitely a nice feature to have. So we better get that in for people.
We do want to get Shop 3 out everywhere as soon as we can. We're just trying to make sure the numbers all make sense on it, and that it's going to be net benefit to everyone. Let's see. The next question here from Vovcast, who says, reminder, don't forget this one. Can you fit 4 parties in the current parties window? It only fits 3 now. And they say, my resolution at 1920 by 1080 can fit 6 parties without scrolling. So 2, 3, 4, 5, should be an option.
Yeah, I feel like this was talked about previously, and it's definitely something that we can address. There's no reason we shouldn't make that wider at higher resolution so people can see more parties. Consider it highlighted.
It is highlighted.
Next question. This one is from OnyxSquared. Hi, devs. If it's easy, in asterisks, please consider a more dramatic color difference between the Fire Breath and Speed Potions. I accidentally hit Fire Breath in really inconvenient times.
Mm-hmm. And then there's kind of a follow-up here from Truon Hida, who said, or you can give us a potion that will cancel a potion that has started, which is another sort of suggestion that we've seen from time to time. But yeah, with regards to the color between Fire Breath and Speed Potions, that is potentially something we could look at, because they are both a kind of orange, essentially. So certainly that's something we could take a look at and try and distinguish those a bit more. We've also certainly discussed in the past the idea of having the ability to just sort of right-click a potion in the potions display, and have that sort of cancel the potion early, especially in the case where, say, you accidentally hit like a huge Fire Breath potion that will last until the end of the event, or like a huge speed potion, and you're like, it's going too fast, I would like to slow down. So that's definitely something that we've talked about in the past, potentially doing. So yeah, I think there's a couple of options here. I think the easiest one would honestly be to look at the colors of the Fire Breath and Speed Potions and change one of the two.
Yeah, I mean, I guess an alternative there, and one of the is sort of, I know I have also struggled to figure out which one is which often when I go in, and I tend to rely on the tooltip instead of the color of the potion. Like, I think that's the right one. But potentially a shape difference would be a better win on that, I think. Like different shape of the vials. I'm not sure how much of that we were tied into from what the Wizard's lore was on that, because I know they were very specific about the colors used on some of these potions.
We certainly followed the colors from sort of descriptions in the player's handbook, but I think we did go our own way on the shapes of the potions. So right. Yeah, that's certainly another option.
Yeah, I feel like if we were going to take a pass at the design of the potions, you've just rather than just updating the colors, because that could also be a problem unto of itself. if you have any kind of color blindness, that the shape would be a real differentiating factor that we could hopefully rely on. Cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, next question here is from Canelian. When we do get a new patron, is there any chance we might be able to buy a level 1 legendary potion from it in the same way we can get a Time Gate Piece Modron chest from the others?
Interesting question. Certainly the Time Gate Piece and Modron chest, you can buy one of those every week. So are you asking to be able to get a level 1 legendary potion every week? Interesting request. I probably wouldn't do something like that on a weekly kind of cooldown on a patron. But certainly maybe in a similar way that you can get a potion of polish from a patron once per patron. That could be something that we could add, a legendary potion or something to that effect. Maybe a golden epic potion. Probably not, but maybe. Certainly we do look at the items available in the patron shops, and we do add new items to those periodically. New skins and GEs and feats and whatnot. So I could see down the road more items being added in there. Maybe legendary potions are a possibility, or other things that are kind of cool and a one-off. But so I don't think we would do a legendary potion in there per week, because that's kind of separate from the main way that we intend players to get legendary stuff, which is by doing trials and on Tiamat.
Okay. Next question from Smuggle Bira. Hello, devs. So what is a champion concept / game mechanic you would love to introduce to the game, you think will ever be done? Maybe you don't think will ever. Yeah. That's my guess. You don't think will ever be done, either because it won't work within the game or can't be done with your tech.
So I think we've talked about this before. I actually have a couple of answers to this. I think the one we've talked about before was the initial design of Xeraphon, who is a doppelganger champion that you can get from the Icewind Dale campaign as an evergreen. And the initial design for Xeraphon was very similar to a champion in Crusaders.
It was a forbidden design
called Mindy the Mime.
When I heard the design, I said no.
And the way that Mindy works in Crusaders still, is that she grabs the formation abilities from a couple of adjacent characters and duplicates them.
Nope.
And it caused it caused a lot of issues in Crusaders.
We're not doing it.
And when we looked at doing it in Champions, it looked like it would cause even more issues. So that got unfortunately nixed pretty early on. But another game mechanic that I don't think we've talked about before that I would have liked to have done in Champions was the idea of damage types. So sort of currently we have attack types. We've got melee, ranged, and magic attacks. But I thought it would have been really cool to do like damage types. Like you've got a mage who uses fireballs, does fire damage, and then some enemies could be more susceptible to fire damage or more resistant to fire damage. Unfortunately, at this point, I think we're just too mature of a game to retroactively add that in. So I doubt we'll ever see that in Idle Champions 1. But you never know. Maybe there'll be an Idle Champions 2 someday. And that would be a pretty cool thing, I think, to put in it. Because I do really like that kind of rock, paper, scissors mechanic that you get from doing damager types and resistant types. I think that can be really interesting. Yeah,
I mean, I just want the bone vampire damage type, where it attacks the enemies, pulls out their bones, they just flop over onto the ground and flip.
Is that a damage type or it's just bones? Like anyone can have bone vampire damage type, where it just removes the bones.
Yep, attack type J.
It's pretty good.
Yep,
it's pretty good. Let's see. The next question here is from Riamus2, who says, I didn't put in a ticket, but wanted to see if you had seen anything where Modron pieces swapped out of one core would not show as available for another core when switching cores, but would be there when switching back. And they say, I eventually entirely lost the two pieces when it happened to me.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting bug. I haven't seen reports of this, and perhaps I know Mars is in the dock here. Maybe he has, and I don't know if run this by Sean and Taylor to see if they've seen any reports of this. But this isn't something that I've seen. The odd one there, the final line there, eventually entirely lost two pieces when it happened. I don't. That's one of the ones that I think sort of maybe is a silver lining here, is that shouldn't be possible, just because of the way the pieces work. They exist in a database table of all the pieces that you have, and there's a reference to where they're stored, so they should still be there. And that is something that I see you put in a ticket. Someone should be able to check that for you, and make sure and find out sort of where they went, because it is possible that they're assigned somewhere that doesn't exist. That's a possibility. If they appear to have completely disappeared. So whatever's going on there, we can definitely get those pieces back for you. But yeah, that's a new one to me. And I think Mars is weighing in there too. He hasn't seen it before either. So yeah, so at the very least, hopefully if this is a ticket that's a new ticket in, that Sean and Taylor can get those pieces back to you. But I'm not sure what's happening with the pieces disappearing as you swap cores. That's a new one.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Cool. Next question here is from McShizman. Is Battery Batiri, wow. Batiri in the Goblin Halls now supposed to be available with Strahd, or should that still be locked? I just started it and noticed just about no champs can do it, but there are now a few that can, including Nahara, maybe just because of her bringing friends. Is that why it's unblocked?
So I don't know the specific answer to this, whether we intentionally allowed that variant to be played in Strahd because of Nahara, but certainly that would be a reason to enable it. A lot of the variants that were locked in patron for patrons were locked because there were simply no champions that you could use, and so you'd have to basically get through the entire variant with click damage, which is not something we want to require of players. So it's possible now that with DM and Nahara and other champions like Mahen, who can bring champions in that are not normally required, or not normally don't normally meet the requirements, that some of those variants that were previously locked could potentially be unblocked now. Now that there are legitimate ways to do it. And I see that some players, McShizman here has like a theory as to why that is happening. I'm not sure. I don't know that that requirement there would change whether or not the variant was available. So we'll have to look into that. I'll ask around and see if that was something we did intentionally, or if that somehow kind of accidentally happened.
Okay. Next question here from Jabsis. Why do new GEs not automatically appear in the GE potion eligibility list?
Because I haven't written that code yet. It's right here on my list of to-dos. Yeah, so the GE potion's a relatively new potion, and quite simply, we did not quite have time to automate all the various systems that feed GEs into the game to automatically update the eligibility of potions. So it is right now based on basically just flagging the items true or false, and so it's still a manual process. So we will hopefully get that fixed in the future.
Yeah, and I guess this was because there wasn't sort of a uniform way in which items that were made available in one way or another to be a GE.
Yeah, because GEs can come from, they can be obtained through weekend promos, they can be attained in premium DLC, and they can, from time to time, be obtained through patron purchases or through the quarterly promotions, quarterly celebrations. So, there's a couple of different ways that they can appear in the game, and we just have to hook each of those up to automatically flag the items when appropriate.
Yeah, and this is because the item itself isn't tagged as like a property of can be upgraded to GE. It's more of the thing that gets purchased is an upgrade that upgrades that item to GE. So sort of it's the direction of the upgrade. Means it's tricky to just sort of that data is spread out, I guess, is the best way to put it.
Let's see. Next question here. We're running short on time, but we got time for a few more questions. The next question here from Wraiths, who asked, and this is actually a question that we answered at the top of the show, but we can cover it again for folks who joined since the beginning. And they say, do you guys know why updates on the Epic Games Store are making the interface and display settings reset?
Yeah, so as Justin mentioned, we did cover this at the top of the show, but if you're just joining us a little late, there was an update that was pushed out on Friday by none other than yours truly, because Peter, who normally does the updates, was out that day, and it was kind of an emergency update. And I did not know the process for the EGS, so I kind of did that running on some outdated instructions. And one of the steps that isn't in those instructions that I wasn't aware of was that you need to clear out that settings file before it gets pushed in the build, because otherwise it overwrites the settings file that people already have. So my apologies, that one was on me, and we have made those instructions now include that if anyone in an emergency has to push up a build, as we did on Friday. Cool. Because we probably have enough time for one or two, you have a preference on the next questions here, Justin?
I'm happy to answer the next one. Yeah.
All right. Okay, then this one here is from Irene UK. Could you have a DM feat that lets us select the champion he brings in, or from a small pool of choices? It is super annoying to have to restart a mission dozens of times trying to get the champions that we need.
Yeah, this is an interesting question, because it kind of goes, it kind of plays towards some of the challenges that we have in game design. So I think it would certainly not be our intention as game designers that there is a super annoying mechanic where you have to restart a mission dozens of times trying to get the specific champion that you want, and that is kind of it's that mechanic would be an invention of how the players are using the champion, rather than an intention of the game designers of how to use the champion. And so I think if I was trying to address this, rather than letting you pick the champion that you bring in, because that's certainly not our intention with DM, I would find a way to not make it so you can restart a mission dozens of times trying to get the champion you need or want, because that's just not a fun it's not a fun mechanic to do that, but it's also not the intention that you can just pick the champion that you bring in with DM. So we'd have to find some way to either meet in the middle, or remove that kind of mechanic of being able to re-roll that over and over and over again. But this is certainly shows one of the challenges of game design, one of the unintended consequences that you can sometimes get by doing things that are outside of sort of the norm. And so, it's just it's an interesting quandary for us as to how to address this particular issue. It's kind of linked a little bit to how some of the best formations require a bunch of champion swapping or doing things that are kind of outside the normal play mechanics in order to max things out, like stacking Baloth stacks, or stacking a whole bunch of healing effects or things that stack through a run in order to push a little bit further. It can be kind of annoying to do those things, but they can give you a benefit, but it's not something we really intend you to do. So it's an interesting challenge of game design.
Yeah, no, that one's that's a tricky one for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I think that's really all we've got time for, unless...
No, I think that's probably it for today.
I know, that's a great question. We left it on, though. I mean, if we only had like 30 more seconds. Anyway.
Well, you know what? If we didn't get to your question this week, don't worry. You'll have another opportunity probably next week, because we will most likely be live again at the same time. But before we sign off, we'd like to thank our tireless mods. I believe this week we were back to Mars and Martin, so thanks to you two. They're the guys who copy your questions into our questions doc and make the chat awesome. So thanks.
And of course, thanks to all of you for hanging out, watching the stream, asking such great questions, and for enjoying the game. Because without you, no one here would get to do what we do.
Yeah, I guess we'd have to do something else.
I guess so. All right. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone.
Click.
Did you say we'd be alive again at this time next week?
I don't know, it's Canada Day tomorrow. Who knows what's going to happen?
Canada, it's probably fireworks and
beer.